Yeah, and then so the craziest thing that you would never...
So wait a minute, just 1 second.
Yep.
Shall we begin?
You aren't stuck in traffic. You are traffic.
Let's begin now.
Please get that bicycle-shaped object out of this shop. Oh, no, dude. No mix and match here. Black bottoms or full-on kit. Pedal on, bro. Pedal on.
Let's begin now.
Oh, geez. Learn the hard way. Wider is better.
Today is Sunday, November 3rd, 2019. You just downloading or listening to
BikeShopCX.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. With me today is Mr. David Palin. We have an amazing show today. We are going to have on Ken Avery, and Stephen Hyde. Talking about tires. This show, I put it out on Twitter. I think anyone listening to this show can learn something about tire choice, pressure choice, tread choice. Even if you have a different tire selection in your quiver, this will give you information about ways to approach what tire to ride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and Ken Avery is always one of the biggest shows of the year.
Everybody loves it when Ken's on.
That's right. And
he's
now
a tire geek.
Now we have Tire Geek and Geeked Out Rider.
Right.
It's great.
Exactly.
No, this is going to be good.
So, and then also, remember on the last show, Mr. David Pan, we talked about the SKF bearings in the Cane Creek bottom bracket.
Was that just the last show? It seems like
that
so
was
many
the last
shows
show.
ago.
Yes. We have one of the engineers from SKF, Mark Hinkley.
Mm-hmm.
I got on the line with him before he's heading over to Europe, and he's going to totally geek out about bearings with us. I think I say to him at one point, dude, the two most popular topics to talk about our bikes are tires and bearings.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's what the tech geeks want to talk about. So he's like, hey, for a bearing engineer like me, that's great.
I can't wait to listen to that one.
It is awesome. If you are at all interested in these bearings or just bearings in general, he's going to give some really good information. And it is a little technical, but I know a lot of people here like that. So there you go. So, All right, that's going to be the show. That and the other typical usual stuff, listener questions, etc. So that's enough of our yapping. Let's get on with it. The Bike Shop is open. Mr. David Palin.
Here I am. I am psyched, man.
What's up, man?
It seems like it's been a long time, but
so much has
just
happened.
A week. It's just a week.
Right. Well, I think 2 weeks. Last week
since we recorded, but I saw you last week in Cincy.
Right. So, but this is, I think it's because like so much has happened. The entire Cincy weekend, which was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who have not heard me say this before, and you probably have, from the day I picked up a microphone, I had a goal of someday I want to announce Cincy CX
with
Mr. Voice of America in cyclocross.
And last weekend, last weekend, your dream came true.
Yeah, it's like, now what do I live for?
What's left?
What is left? So what a great weekend that was.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. I loved every minute of it. And despite the incredible amount of rain on Saturday, there's not many places, not many courses in the U.S. where you can get that much rain on Saturday and then people be racing file treads on Sunday, I don't think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the wind of Sunday morning really dried up that course. And as we say over and over again during the race, that course used to be a golf course. It was built to drain well. And it did indeed do that.
Yeah. So
just out in the woods there, not a golf course.
Well, it's funny because, we have an interview. I call it an interview, but it's really a tire discussion.
Indeed.
With Stephen Hyde coming up, and we talk about that. And he mentions that, how it's almost, once you get off the part that was an old golf course, it's kind of like two different kinds of dirt on that course.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. I'd never really thought about that before. So that's all coming up. And it was funny because I think I mentioned to him at one point, I saw him on Friday I was like, hey, man, because we had been emailing about him coming on the show for the tire thing. And he remembered it was years ago when we tried to get him on, or I tried to get him on the old Bike Shop show.
Right.
When he was still riding for the Jam Fund. Mm-hmm. And it just never worked out. And so
he never thought we would last, right? I'm going to wait these guys out and see if they last.
But I had forgotten that, and he remembered it Friday. He's like, yeah, remember we tried to... I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. So anyways, that's so funny. So yeah, we got some just amazing stuff coming up with Stephen Hyde that I think you're really going to like. Talking tires. And to stay awake, Mr. David Palin, what are you drinking right now?
Well, what is you say we have a techie discussion around tires, and then, oh, by the way, how do you stay awake listening to that stuff? Oh man, I'm on Grimpeur Bros, and today I am tasting my tasting notes of some berries because I am drinking the Sunny G Special.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, what are you drinking over there?
I'm going to be drinking some of the Full Schleck.
Nice.
And so, for people that don't know what we're talking about.
Who doesn't know what we're talking about?
If you get on over to GrimpeurBrothers.com or just go to WideAnglePodium.com, and there's a link to GrimpeurBrothers.com. If you buy the Full Schleck or Hello Cyclocross Friends Espresso, I've been drinking more espresso lately.
Have you? I've noticed that.
I got my espresso machine working again, and it's actually getting optimal pressure. So I'm actually really making espresso instead of just like strong drip coffee, which is all I was making before.
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking to get more of that Hello Cyclocross Friends for sure. And if you buy either of those two coffees, it helps out the network. It helps out the show.
What network would that be?
That would be the Wide Angle Podium Network, Mr. David Palin.
And that is a good thing.
Yeah, and it really helps us out. It helps them out. Dan is a guy who has put actual money, back into the sport.
Indeed.
And there's not a lot of people that can say that.
There's very few. Yeah. Dan is one of them. Dan's a good one.
And at this time in the cyclocross, what's the word I'm looking for? Atmosphere of what's going on right now, we need people like that right now.
And we need people that see the world and what it is.
Yes.
And perhaps in a little disarray, but not just get really fixated and hooked on what's wrong. Yeah. But how do I move forward?
Dan's all about the positive.
He is.
He's all about the positive.
About the positive.
Just a great company to support.
If you drank more Full Schleck or more Hello Cyclocross Friends, I'm saying you. This is the royal you. You, our listeners.
The royal you. Is that like the royal scam?
Probably.
Okay. You know what I'm referring to?
No.
Steely Dan, the song, The Royal Scam.
Sing a few bars.
Anyways.
I'll jump in.
Anyways.
Yeah. So when Black Friday comes.
Yeah.
It's not that song, though.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No.
Anyways. So.
No, it's not that song. People are like, what are they talking about?
Go to Hazy Vinyl Jive. You'll pick up on all this stuff. But if you drank more, our friends, our cyclocross friends,
yes,
our Full Schleck friends,
yes,
if you drank more coffee, you'd be a better person.
Right.
Period.
Absolutely.
Good enough reason to buy Grimpeur Bros.
For sure. So.
Done. Which, that's it, okay? Now we've solved that. Let me just check that off the list. Okay. Solve world problems. What else?
Let's talk about the Works Hydro Shot. The Works Hydro Shot is the ultimate tool that's practically made for cycling enthusiasts like us.
Like us.
This portable power cleaner uses the Works 20-volt power share batteries and pulls from, are you ready for this?
I'm waiting.
Any fresh water source. And this is really the big thing about this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That you can just grab a my favorite way to do it is a 5-gallon bucket. I know some people really like the 2-liter. That just didn't seem like enough to me.
It looks kind of like a Ghostbuster setup.
Yeah. So I prefer the 5-gallon bucket, but the beauty of it is you can do it whatever way you like it. It's very simple to do it the way that you like to do it, right?
Exactly.
So you can do it however you want with the bottle cap connector. If I have a hose available, I like that too because you get unlimited volume that way.
Right.
And 5 angle settings on the nozzle, so you're not switching out. Last year at Cincinnati,
tell me,
my buddy Corey Green goes to use his power washer, right? He pulls the handle and the little lock mechanism that holds the tips in,
had
not like
back in.
released.
Yeah.
He pulls the pressure, his tip goes, boom, Gone. I mean, they couldn't find. They're walking around in the grass. Finally, I'm like, guys, I got spares. If you know, they had spares too, but they were a tighter angle.
Right.
Than they wanted. They wanted the real
Luckily,
wide
they didn't
one.
like shoot you in the back of the head with that
So
thing.
I was like, here, I have another wide one. Here, you can just borrow my backup. So, but this, that can't happen.
Right, because it's locked in place and you just turn it.
You just turn it to which one you want. So there you go. So Works is offering our listeners 15% off of all Hydra shots and accessories, Mr. David Palin.
Did they put together a bike cleaning kit for us to check out?
They even put together a bike cleaning kit for you to check out. Get your Works Hydra shot at yourcleanbike.com. Enter promo code CLEANBIKE, and you get 15% off any Hydra Shot item. That's YOURCLEANBIKE.com. Enter the code CLEANBIKE at checkout. Hope to see you on the trails this fall, riding hard and clean.
Yeah, we're all about clean racing out here.
Yes.
So by all means. Hard and clean with the Works Hydra shot.
It's just been a great tool for me this year so far. I like having it. Doesn't take up any space. Easy to pack, easy to break out, and easy to use.
Yeah.
So.
Some podcasts out there, and I understand, talk about the fact that we have ads on our show, and that's all well and good.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we are lucky enough that we're reading ads of products that we truly believe in. And this one here, we were so excited with it when they came on board.
Yeah.
And this is a product that we all, you and I at least,
it's something I have
strongly
I have no problem standing behind this thing.
I mean,
I think it's just a great tool to have. So, all right, Mr. David Palin.
Yes, sir.
Are you ready to hear from Stephen Hyde and Ken Avery?
I can't wait.
From Vitoria Tires. So, all right, I got together with these two, and we the gist of this conversation is about going through the process that Stephen Hyde uses to select what tires and, in some ways, tire pressure he's going to use at a race.
Yeah.
He talks about his communication with his mechanic, kind of what goes through his head, what he likes about the tires that he has to choose from, and just a lot of stuff like that. And Ken Avery is there too, obviously, as the Vitoria tread guru.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And so he has input too, and it is just a great conversation that I think everybody is going to love. Are you ready, Mr. David Palin?
Let's listen to them now.
Here we go. All right, Bike Shop CX listeners, we are back. We are ready for some more tire geekiness, and anytime we do that, we got two great guests to have on. One I'm sure people are going to associate with tire geekiness, and that's Ken Avery from Vitoria. Ken, welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me.
We get every time you're on, we get tons of tire geek, and people are like, I hope this question isn't too geeky, and I'm always like, oh no, it can't be.
Dude, there's no limit.
That's right. So, and with us, Ken, is a guy who I think has ridden a cyclocross race before, Stephen Hyde. Stephen, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
So good to have you on. We were just talking about how we've been trying to get you on for not that I don't want to make it sound like it's your fault, but we just were laughing about how we tried to be on before and it just never worked out, and now here we are. So awesome, man. So glad you're here, dude. And
it took a few years, but we figured it out.
Few years, right? And hey, so that was before you had even won nationals yet. I mean, I think so. See, I wanted you on even before you were famous.
I think I was on the Jam Fund back then.
That's right.
That was the first couple of years.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, all right, guys. Well, again, thanks everybody for being here, and we want to talk about tires a little bit, of course. And basically the main thing we want to talk about is the process for determining tire choice, and maybe talk about pressure a little bit and all that stuff too. So, Stephen, you guys are riding the Terrenos, correct?
Yeah, we're riding the full line of the Terrenos.
And so let's just get into that tire selection, I guess. Is sometimes when you roll up or you're coming to a race, say in the morning or something like that, is tire choice kind of obvious? Are there times when it's just obvious, like it's pouring rain or it's bone dry or something like that?
Totally. There's days, and here's the kind of the beauty of the Torino line that I particularly enjoy about it is that it's a very simple line. It's dry, mixed, wet, right? Like you don't wake up and go like, oh, I got to do some math on like which tire I got to use and like what did I, you just like roll up and you're like, okay, I'm either going to go on a file tread, a mixed, or a wet tire, and so it makes it really easy. And there's a bit of an overlap with each one of the tires, but you get to kind of fine tune your choices, right? So it may be very obvious where when I get up in the morning, I shoot a quick text over to my mechanic and I say like, hey, Mike, I'll be there at noon. Can you please set up the bike with this gearing setup, these tires at this pressure? We'll go from there, right? It's a simple starting point.
Right.
And yeah, usually I can look out the window at the hotel and pretty much guess what I'm going to ride. And every now and then, we kind of deviate from that, especially on the dry conditions. We might kind of always start for me if it's dry with the file and, see how the traction is and go up from there. And sometimes it's a mixed decision. And sometimes like we go fully over to the middle tread, the mixed tire, or sometimes we mix and match and run a little bit of A and a little bit of B.
Yeah. Now, see, because that's a really interesting thing. Because I helped Mark actually pit for Katie at Nationals in Reno, and that was bone dry, dusty. And I tell people, she rode a Limus that race, right? I'm like, because it was so dry, there was these hidden stuff under the ground that she was like, I can't see this stuff and I'm hitting it, so I want to run higher pressure. So because I'm running higher pressure, I want a little more tread. And she went all the way up to what would be considered a mud tread a lot of times. So there's instance, sounds like for you there's instances like that too.
Yeah, totally. And like Katie and I can run, like, when we show up to a race, like she could be, for instance, that race, like I was on a file tread,
right.
It was, you can have totally different kind of outlooks on tires depending on like your riding style, how much you weigh, conditions like in the morning versus in the evening, or even just an hour apart. I mean, we've certainly gone through that where, Katie will be, 2 hours before me will be on a completely different tire because the conditions are different.
Right,
so,
right.
Having all those things, and then we're on tubulars, right? So they're all glued to rims. We're not going to change out tires. So,
right.
We have all that stuff set up, and it really depends. I mean, sometimes you even start out and you're like, oh my God, this is like, I couldn't imagine ever changing tires. And then mid race, you're like, oh God, I need to change tires.
Right.
Yeah. I think tires are probably the biggest variable in cyclocross, period.
Yeah. Now, you were a lucky rider because you have one of the best mechanics in the business with Mike Berry there. How much you mentioned, you might call him in the morning. How much does he give you input on stuff like that? Because I know, like, as mechanics, a lot of times we're in the pit earlier in the day. We're hearing stuff that other riders are trying, seeing, and they're saying this works, and, we're hearing this kind of stuff. Does he give you that kind of input sometimes, and then you still make the final decision?
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like, one of the cool things is since I've been on Cannondale, I've worked with 4 different mechanics. Every one of them I thought was like, wow, this guy is like the best mechanic I've ever worked with.
That's great.
And, and Mike actually started as, our like Devo mechanic, and he was just running around with all these guys. And, I've always watched Mike and been like, he is a guy that just like, he's always impressed me with his attention to detail, his data-driven kind of perspective on it. And so that becomes really, really cool to work with, because all of a sudden I can be like, hey, Mike, I'm having a hard time with this tire choice. Or maybe I'll show up and he'll be like, hey, last 2 years you've ridden this tire at this pressure. So I went ahead and put that on. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Look at you, right. Mr. Wizard. Yeah.
It's magic.
Yeah. And so, like I can, I've worked with other mechanics that, maybe have that by memory and maybe he has it. But, having that stuff cataloged and ready to go. And so we can make those decisions where like, oh, well, I won this race 2 years ago and I was on this tires in similar conditions. We can look back at that and go like, okay, cool. Well, if there's any doubt, that worked. Mm-hmm. And then I'll look at my notes and go like, okay, yeah, that is what we used. But my notes in my training log say like, I won despite of those tires.
Right.
Or vice versa,
Yeah.
So yeah, it does often come down to a very last minute decision, but it also, we're both professionals. We show up, we have the tools that we need to do it. And we also have a method in which to vet our choices. And so that becomes the most important thing, is not just having the choices, but knowing how to break down and make a decision on them that makes sense, and then come up with a B decision and a C decision, and having all those backups ready.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Hyde is such a professional, but he's somebody who never forgets his roots, and I like that about Hyde. And it's as a product designer at Vitoria, I work with a lot of different athletes, but the reason that I wanted to really pull Hyde into this conversation today was because he has these perspectives, yet he's still got his feet on the ground. So I always like that about him and telling these stories. So it's funny because, Stephen, a minute ago you mentioned, you're at your hotel room and you look at your window and your mechanic's setting your bike up for you and all this stuff. It wasn't long ago where you were in a tent on the side of the highway somewhere, and you knew it was raining because you could hear it in your tent. You know what I mean? So,
I knew it was raining because I was soaking wet.
Right.
Totally, right? And so I approach it from that perspective. I mean, I have a long time ago a race background, more on the mountain bike side, but I've done a few cyclocross races in my past, obviously, and I'm not the guy. Especially these days, who is, calling my mechanic for my hotel room, having my bike set up. So it's, I like to think of it from the consumer standpoint as well, just the, your Cat 4 racer, right? Whatever. And how they would roll in, and they're going to roll into a fresh course that's not beat in yet. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be a little soft. The lines aren't going to be maybe as well defined. And that's where, and the fact that they're new, right? So they're trying to make these decisions, and they have to also think about the additional variable of what's it going to be like after it kind of gets worn in a little bit. Or say you ride Cat 2 or 3, and so there's going to be some races after you, sure, but there's also going to be some races before you. So maybe you pre-ride the course in the morning and it's really soft, but then by the time your race comes around, it's a lot faster course,
Right.
And that's where I think that versatility comes into play. Being able to, switch tires if you want, or switch wheels. So if you're running tubulars, you got to switch your wheel. Some of the privateers, they don't have multiple wheel sets. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't. And so if you're running tubeless, to be able to kind of switch a tubeless tire in the parking lot, is beneficial to them in that way. So I like to think of it in those terms as well. As you mentioned, there are some overlap between the models, and we try to make it as obvious as possible. When we did this product line, it was how do you make this complex thing with all these variables easy to understand, Mm-hmm. And so that's why we did the dry, the mix, the wet. But the cool thing is that you're not kind of limited by it in that way. Stephen, as you mentioned before, our Terreno dry sort of is our answer to a file tread, but it's a bit more versatile for a couple different reasons on the tech side, which you can listen to for hours in the other podcasts that I've already done on the show. But basically, the thing that I think might be kind of cool, Stephen, is if you could tell a story of a change in condition and how, particularly on that dry model, how did that kind of work to kind of overlap into a mix, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, so you're right that each, it's a very simplistic line, but the overlap I speak of is more of the versatility of each tire. Where in the past I would look at okay, this is either going to be a file tread day, it's going to be a mixed day, or it's going to be a heavy mud day. And I have been very excited about the idea that there are times when man, I need a really fast tire that has a lot of traction, and there's a bunch of dead grass and all these things, and where I might just go to another tire, I can trust this tire at a little bit farther out on those edges of what they're capable of, or what that traditional tire design is really capable of. When you look at stuff like when I'm in Europe, there's oftentimes where you see the majority of people just on that traditional mixed Grifo type tire,
Mm-hmm.
and it's even in the muddier races, they'll go to that Grifo design tire, that mixed tire, because of dropping into a rut or something like that. What I found is that I'll be on that file tread a lot longer or a lot deeper into wet kind of terrain than I would have in the past. I mean, you've got the scaling in the middle sections that, like, it transforms that traditional super fast kind of road type file tread into this like grippy cornering machine with also braking, which you never really got with a traditional file tread.
Yeah.
So it's really cool where like I might run down into like Zolder where, yeah, Zolder is a lot of road, a lot of sand, but also a pretty fair amount of mud and like fast downhill, hard left or right, like turns on mud. And I found that the dry actually, I'll use the dry when it's pouring rain outside, you know, and it's, you know, it goes against that kind of, you know, if you were just to go off of the name of dry, mix, wet, it goes against convention. But really the versatility of these tires has dumbfounded me at times where I've gone in and been like, there's no way I'm riding this tire. And I come back and I'm like, okay, I'm riding this tire. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's somehow hilarious.
I remember a time at Cincy a few years ago where you guys were on the start line and it started to pour rain. So it's interesting, Stephen, how you say that, you know, like if you have that ability to push, say you had, I don't remember what people were putting on their wheels before it started to rain, but like you
everybody was on files.
Yeah, if you have that ability to push that tread a little bit farther than other people, I think that's a perfect example where that would have been a huge advantage because the instant it started to rain, I mean, you guys were like, I think they had already given the 30-second warning, right? And it just opened up. The pit on that race exploded. People were running everywhere, grabbing wheels, getting ready for everyone to come in. Where if you had that, you know, that ability to push your tires a little bit farther and maybe you could wait another half lap before you came in, that would have been a huge advantage in that race. So that's really
100%.
interesting to hear you say that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was, you know, we were just in Cincy, like I just got back from there, you know, 2 days ago, and it's funny because I was talking about that, and I was like, me and actually Carrie Werner and I were talking about it, and I was like, I remember everyone was freaking out. I didn't freak out. I was like, it's cool. I'll just pit.
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, this was the year before we were on Vitoria, and I remember going like, okay, I have to pit. I have to go like very easy, and then I have to pit as soon as I can. And so I pitted, and you're right. I totally like, I was thinking about that, and I was like, if that would happen today and I was on the dries, I wouldn't have to pit.
Yeah.
And I remember exactly what lines I took. I remember why I took them. And I remember having to kind of adjust accordingly because once you switch tires in a race, you all of a sudden have to like, you don't get that recon lap anymore where you're going out and like, okay, go down another half PSI, go down another half PSI. Okay, I got to fold it a little bit differently. I got to like take this turn a little bit. No, you get the bike, you go race pace again. So switching tires mid races, you know, it can be like a total disaster.
Right.
Even if you're switching to, you know, the quote right tire for the condition, you still have to ride that tire differently. It's not like you just jump on and you're like, okay, it's the exact same.
Right.
So yeah, totally. Like if, you know, I was thinking about that this weekend, like, oh, I am in a really good place here where if, you know, I think I can outride anyone else who's going to need to switch, you know, with any of the tires that I'm on, and be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how much stock do you put into? Because Ken, you mentioned this. People might have to ride without a lot of other people having ride. How much stock do you put into pre-ride as far as tire selection goes? Is that just kind of okay? You're just kind of laying the groundwork for what you might think to ride the next day. I'm thinking of like the Friday pre-ride this weekend was at 2:00. You know, so I mean, how much did you really learn on Friday for what you're going to race on Saturday? Say.
Not a lot. I mean, honestly, like we went out and I was on the dries, and but we go through it the same way. We go through and say like, okay, put the dries on. Let's dial in tire pressure. We don't spend as much time on it, knowing the weather forecast, but we do catalog it, and we do like go through and say like, okay, this is appropriate for the workout that I'm about to do, and you know that just gives me the opportunity to get on the course and really feel out what it's going to be like at different speeds, and then start to kind of imagine what that breakdown is going to be once the weather changes. So yeah, we do get an idea of like, you know, how the course is going to flow, but with the exception that like we know we're going to change tires 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Ken, did you want to say something?
No, I mean, that's it's awesome. I mean, I think what he's saying is like, it's honestly, I always just listen to what athletes say and like try to, I mean, I have my own experiences on some level, but the cool thing about this whole line, just from the start, which we spoke about before, was just that, I mean, it's really athlete driven, and all these experiences have gone into everything we design, but especially this Terreno line of cyclocross and gravel tires. So it's cool to hear some like actual stories after the fact now, where this has been kind of like proven out. I would love to know, Stephen, on that topic. I mean, like, what so often people look at like a mixed tire as sort of like a do everything tire, but as a product designer, I try to do as much as I can to make sure that we design around any of the traditional deficiencies. Like, so a minute ago, you were talking about how a typical file tread has these setbacks, and we were able to design around them with the fish scales on the Terreno Dry model. How would you give a consumer just a privateer racer the same kind of an explanation for like the mix? They come to a course and there's going to be like some loose over hard, or maybe like a little bit of mud, but you still got to roll fast. Give me a story about like when you use the mix and why you did, I guess.
Sure. And this is an opportunity I get on race weekends where people do come up and they say like, hey, I'm running here are my two choices. What would you do? And I've been there, like, I once was an amateur racer that had a couple of sets of tubulars, and I always had to like kind of pick out, my two wheel sets, what I was going to use. And so for me, take like Rochester for an example, where you might even look at it as like a traditional dry course. It's, there's no precipitation, like it's dry, it's a little bit dusty even, but I ended up actually using the mixes for that race. And where I would start to see differences in what I would choose and what I might suggest an amateur to use is their technical ability and where they feel like they're limited on the course. Because quite often you talk to an athlete, and it's very rare that I find it very rare that their tires are the limiter for them. I often find that their technical abilities are actually more the limiter. And so getting a feel for what a rider actually rides, like having a rider figure out how they actually ride, what their limitations are on that, and then start looking at how best to use their tires. Because tires are as individual, the setup of a tire is as individual as the rider. And riders can be corner over cookers. They can, they could not quite know how to use the brakes properly going into corners. You know what I mean? So it's often comes down to like where you put your power down and where you put your brakes down, how fast you go into corners and how much finesse you have through those corners. So when I talk to a rider that's like, hey, I've got mixes, or I've got muds, I've got wets, what would you use today? And I would ride with them and I would say like, okay, it looks like you have a ton of power, but you are all over the place. I would say focus on getting your tire pressure correct before you switch over to a different tire, especially if you're using the mixes. It's such a versatile tire. It's got a real tall center knob. It's got really nice side knobs to it. So it can be a really aggressive cornering tire if you're braking correctly. And I often find, like at Rochester, that there was just enough loose grass from the races before. It's kind of littered all over the course that it warranted a little bit more side knob to get into those corners. And it also warranted a little bit different kind of steering from me. I needed to keep the bike a little bit more upright than I normally would, and let those kind of mid knobs and side knobs really do their work, really do their job well. So again, you go in and you say like, not just how like are the conditions, but like how am I riding these conditions and how am I going to race these conditions? Then you start to really figure out like what tires you really, really need. But oftentimes it's like, hey, you got one tire, like just figure out what pressure you need to like not blow them off of your rims when you go around the corner, and you'll be fine.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
If you gave it a percentage of like the importance of tire pressure and tread, I mean, are you basically? It sounds like you can, with the technique that you use, you can actually widen the usability of any tread by being more in control and more aware, I should say, of your tire pressure.
Oh, tire pressure is king.
Yeah.
I mean, tread is one thing, but and you know, tread allows you an option for, you know, large variables in conditions, but tire pressure allows you the specificity of your riding style and the needs of traction, speed, and braking, cornering.
Gotcha.
So for me, it's 50-50.
Oh, okay. That's what I was that was my next question. Would you call it 50-50? So, okay, interesting.
Yeah. So, because there might be a situation where like I'll run the same tire or I'll run a different tire with almost identical conditions, but I'll run a different tire at different pressure to kind of like to curtail those needs that I might have for like a little bit more straightaway speed or a little bit more hard turning speed or less turning speed, you know, depending on like the conditions are one thing, but the course design and the speed of the actual racing are so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any like pitfalls that people like fall into? Like the one obvious one I can think of is we get this question a lot. We're constantly telling people, don't choose a tire or your pressure for a single element on the course, right? You want to choose whatever's going to make your lap times the fastest. Is there anything else like that like falls into mind where you see people like, oh, this is something people do that isn't the best way to do it?
I find from my personal experience that I think people tend to go to the heaviest tire possible as far as like tread design when they don't feel comfortable with their technical ability, and they tend to go to that like, well, I'm just going to put the biggest tread on here I can, and I'm just going to whale this course. I often find that a bigger hammer is pretty heavy, and it often not necessarily the tool for the job. And just taking a step back and going like, okay, what if I slowed down a minute, tried this tire, and ramped up my effort? Basically like, what if I took 20 minutes to learn how to ride this tire instead of going to this default, I need more traction?
Right.
That's something that I find is best started at home. I train on files. I train on the dries, pretty much like whether it's wet outside or not. And that allows me to not just go out and like kind of have hard conditions to ride in all the time, but it makes me slow down a bit in my off-road riding, relearn constantly how to adapt to those conditions, as opposed to just going like, put the wet on.
Yeah.
It's like, I need it. You know what I mean? Like, same thing with mountain bikes. I mean, Ken has been working with me on the mountain bike side for a little bit. And, one thing that I've really found is that, I've ridden every cross-country tire they have, and I have so many positives for so many of the models. But what we really found was I end up just riding the Mezcals most of the time. It's because it's for me, I'm a rider that looks to improve on my own standings and improve on my own abilities every time I step on the bike. And often, if I challenge myself in that way, I'm really surprised as to what the tires are actually capable of doing.
Oh, it's so good to hear that.
Yeah.
So often we talk about what the fastest tire is. And I think Steven really just gave a good kind of look at like fastest means many things, especially to many people and in many conditions, right? So like it's very much a specific thing on the day and on the circumstance. That said, it's the kind of thing where like Steven, I'm about efficiency. I mean, you know, in my racing days, I still had probably more skill than fitness. And so, like, I would look to places to make up on the course, you know, in terms of that. But, you know, what it really comes down to is that you teach yourself how to trust the most efficient tire, and then as a skill rider, say, and then make it up, you know, in the other sections. The cool thing about cross is that you have mountain bikers who do cross and you have road guys who do cross, right? And so, like, the road guys they're going to be, you know, the guys with all the power and all that. And obviously, maybe not as much in terms of skill compared to, say, somebody who spends a little bit more time off road. And so, you know, that might be a kind of scenario where you have somebody who chooses a bit heavier type, but what I mean by heavier is a bit more aggressive type tread design. Because really they don't weigh all that much different. It's really a matter of, like, how much tread you need, kind of a thing. And so it really is a matter of, like, choosing a tire to kind of make up for whatever you want to make up for. You know what I mean? And so for my circumstance, personally, it was all about trying to find the fastest thing, and kind of winging it on the techie stuff. And then, you know, but for somebody who's like a road person who's coming in across, they might want to run mixes everywhere because you could, and you'd have that little extra insurance policy where you have, like, you know, a tread that's compatible with a wide variety of terrain, but yet it's not going to really slow you down either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's really, yeah. Well, I mean, we get the question too a lot, and the mix might be the right choice for this, of people that, like, you know, because we get questions from all different levels of riders, and they're like, okay, I have enough funds to buy my first set of tubulars, right? So I'm going to have one set of tubulars and then two other sets of wheels that are clinchers or tubeless or something like that. What would you say I should glue on? And, like, that, we always kind of say, like, a mid-tread, like a mix or something like that. Learn that, you know, and then if you can expand your stable of tubulars, then go out from there. Steven, do you have, you know, when there are people like that, because we get questions a lot about people that are trying to learn how to ride, learn how to push their tires more to the limits, and, like, is there, like, a drill or some kind of drills, like figure eights or something you run where you're kind of, like, adjusting pressure and seeing at what point does the tire start to fold over on itself, you know, and keeping track of, like, the temperature outside and what kind of conditions you're riding on? Do you do any drills or anything like that?
I do. I have, like, an off-road course that I use. It's well, I have a few, but one of the good ones around here that we've made is it's an old quarry, and it's got a lot of different conditions in it. It's got you know, like, wooded sections that are pretty rooty. It's got some, like, really mixed up like dirt bike track. It's got a lot of sand, etc. And I'll go out there, I'll throw a couple of rocks here and there and just kind of, like, use them as points. And yeah, I'll go out and, like, push myself on how far I can turn you know, in any given direction on those conditions. But, you know, one thing that I found specifically the last 2 years, I think, riding these tires, is that, you know, it's a very high TPI tire, and it has actually changed the way that I ride the tubular. You know, forever you have, like, it seems like people ride, you know, you ride clinchers one way and you ride tubulars another way. And this is for the first time probably in my life that I got on a tubular that I was like, oh, this feels a little bit different. And when I realized that high TPI tire made that casing made that tread react a little bit differently, all of a sudden I'm putting a half PSI higher a little bit, you know, a little bit higher, or maybe a whole PSI, and I'm really leaning that tire a whole lot more than I used to. So, you know, it really depends on what tire compound you're on, what casing you're on, and really, like, how fast you're going to be going. So there might be times where, yeah, I'll go out in the yard when it's, like, super wet outside, like it is today, and I'll kind of go through. I have a little set of barriers, and I have a couple of, like, I kind of let my yard grow up and then mowed a few little things into it.
It's a good excuse not to have to cut the lawn. Oh no, that's training. That's for training.
Yeah. Yeah, mostly because I didn't want to mow the lawn. And I'll go out and just do, like, nice, like, slow speed seated turns with accelerations out of them, and really see how low I can get those tires and how they start to react. But that, again, changes with speed, changes with the aggressiveness of the racing. So yeah, you know, as far as, like, drills, no, I don't have anything specific, but I do practice running those tire pressures. And I also use the same, there's one thing I'll say is I have a Craftsman inflator, and that's what the team uses. So I bought my own. And that's important because that reads a lot differently than a floor pump does. And so actually, the number is arbitrary. It's how it feels. Like the PSI number, the bar number is kind of arbitrary, and it's really how it feels. But for me, in the professional setting that I'm in, like having that transfer across, I can say like, hey, I run 19 PSI in these conditions at home. We can replicate that there. We're not going from floor pump to hand inflator, et cetera, and then just trying to figure it out, because then those numbers become very confusing.
Yeah, so, your inflators need to be consistent, right? Even the number almost doesn't matter as long as the number is the same, right, on both guns, whatever you're using.
The number is absolutely irrelevant. It could be in bar, it could be whatever, as long as they're the same, correct? Right. And so some people use those little, like a digital gauge or something like that. A lot of people that come from mountain bike will use that digital gauge. I don't find they work quite as well with cyclocross because we're a lower volume tire. So even just a little psst of air, I can feel that immediately.
That's a big percentage. Yeah,
totally. I mean, I'll feel the difference between a bike that just got air in it and a bike that has been sitting in the sun for an hour. Like, I'll feel the difference in that. I'll get on it and be like, why is this one higher? Why does this one feel lower? Things change. Things change very quickly. So having consistency in that, I feel like, is the most important thing.
Now, another thing I'm curious about, what do you do with I don't know how many pit bikes you have, 2 or 3. Do you usually what's that?
I said 45.
45. But say like the next bike if you're starting on, say, just for the sake of something to call it the A bike, and say the B bike is the first one you're going to switch to, do you match the tire pressure the same, or are there instances where you might be like, oh, I'm kind of on the border with pressure here, maybe we could set up a bike with a little bit less and I'm going to go to that if I need it, kind of thing? Or are they the same?
Sometimes it depends. Like, I've certainly gone, I'd say most of the time what I start with is what we're going to run in the pit on, so essentially I have 2 bikes in the pit and I have one that I start with. And that's just kind of standard for us. And I'll usually start, with the same bike. Often I'll say, hey, maybe put a bike like, maybe I start on the dries and I'll say, hey, maybe put a set of mixes in, or maybe I'll even say like, put a bike with mixes and a bike with a mix on the front and a dry on the back. Or, hey, it looks like it's going to rain. Why don't you go ahead and take a bike with wets on it and another set of wets, with you to the pit.
Right.
And there's also been times where like I've been like, okay, I'm going to start on this pressure, and because it's a long, super fast straight with a bunch of like giant holes and rocks, and then I'll switch once the like tempo starts to kind of come down and the racing kind of separates a little bit more. I'll switch to a bike with like half PSI lower or a whole PSI lower or something like that.
Yeah.
It depends. Oftentimes like in a racing scenario, you're kind of at the liberty of whoever's next to you. So like, unless you're just a whole shot monster like my teammate Curtis, there's not like, you're at the mercy of whoever's next to you. So if there's one line, I'm thinking of like somewhere like Overijse or like these crazy races in Europe where you just like, you start on a road and we're not going like, you're not trying to get the whole shot because like you just want to be better than everyone. You want to get the whole shot because it's about to turn into absolute chaos because it goes down to one lane.
Yeah.
And you've got 8 guys 12 rows back that all want to clobber you because they don't want to be behind anybody. You're next to somebody. So, sometimes you're going to go like 15 miles an hour faster in the start. And you'll never go that fast again. So you might want to put 2 more PSI in your tire just so you don't smash it and, break a rim or flat right off the bat.
And what kind of stuff goes into your decision to run 2 different treads, say?
Again, it depends on like the type of racing. I mean, sometimes I'll go out and I'll ride, say Rochester for an example, and I keep bringing up Rochester because it's it and Waterloo as well at Trek. There are two courses where on paper kind of only makes sense to run a file or a dry. Mm-hmm. And when you get on it, you're like, okay, wait, hang on. Hard packed ground, lots of grass, but whatever particular grass or whatever particular dirt it is sheds grass really quickly. And so all of a sudden you're like, okay, green is grip, and you go to lean in and literally all that grass just deteriorates underneath you. Right. And where you thought that file was really going to just grip and, grip and rip it, all of a sudden it's like the braking force is ripping that grass away and all your grip. So, that might be a thing where like, okay, well, maybe I actually need a little bit more grip on the front, just in case this goes, or it seems like I've even run file on the front, dry on the front and mixed on the rear, which is not a common
no, that's
setup,
kind of backwards what most people would think. Yeah,
exactly. But here's the thing is, often you see there's riders that want a lot more grip on the front, and there's riders that want a lot more grip on the back. And the difference between those two are usually one is going to be a twinkle toes, like really finesse your way around a turn kind of rider, and the other one is going to be like, okay, I've got to put a ton of watts out of this corner. Mm-hmm. And that's what I need is like, I need ultimate traction and the ability to not just have traction, but break loose of traction and gain traction again. And oftentimes that's where the real like tread debate comes in, and more often than not the pressure debate comes in is how can I not just like keep the traction, but I know I'm gonna lose traction. It's gonna happen. Mm-hmm. Like if you're not losing traction in corners that typically you would have plenty of traction in, you're not racing for the win. Like it's not like there are times where you just have to push the bike and the equipment way farther than you're comfortable with, or the equipment is ready, in theory to like handle. So you got to be ready for it to break loose and then figure out how to get that traction again. And so often you look at like weird combos like that where you're like, okay, cool. This is just like a, it's kind of like the discussion of just going to like the most aggressive tread you can, but in a medium spice version.
Yeah. Did you notice this weekend in Cincy, it was like on Saturday in the mud day, the mud was like a half-inch deep, and then under that, it was like dry. I mean, there was times when people were like riding by, the tire would skid, and then like dust would come up. And I'm like, it's pouring rain, and there's like dust underneath this half-inch of mud. It's the most crazy thing ever. So it's kind of like what you're talking about with the grass breaking away, too, I would imagine.
Totally. I mean, that course, so it's on a golf course, right? And so golf courses aren't like
an old golf course. We don't. Yeah, it's a retired golf course, so people don't get excited, right?
Yeah, it's mega retired. So it's one of those things where like that is not the same ground that when you go around the backside through that little trail section. Those are two different grounds. Like they're two different soil compositions. You have this on the golf course part, where all the green is. You have this packed clay that goes down for probably a foot, I don't know, but and then you have the grass on top of it, right? So it's a very particular type of traction need there, where once it's wet and once you start to lose some of that surface, like once you get over an inch of rain on that course in particular, there's really not that much of a difference between the grass and the brown, what we call like, the green stripes and the brown stripes. And often you're like, okay, well, the brown stripes are not going to have, they're usually deep, and they're often like slick and kind of soupy. And then you got the grass where you'll probably have some grip, but it's going to be a little bit slower at times. This is basically the same. Like for whatever reason, Cincinnati, that King CX course is like, it's too hard packed to make any ruts. So you never get to like actually build in your own bits of traction. Like, that's one of the things that people don't really see about professional cyclocross racing or the top end of the cyclocross racing is that like ruts don't come because we all accidentally ride on the same spot.
It's purpose driven. It's purpose driven, right?
Yeah. It's not like a miracle that happens. It's not it's not a rainbow. It's just like, it's because we're like, okay, if we all ride in this exact same spot, we're going to magically give ourselves some traction, and we're going to give ourselves the ability to ride through this corner. So, it's like it's an unspoken team effort across the board to like make this one spot where we can all ride on it. Mm-hmm. It's to everyone's advantage that's racing. And it really doesn't do that on that course. So all of a sudden it becomes
more of a
tire
free-for-all.
pressure.
Yeah,
a tire pressure free-for-all where you're just like, how low can you possibly go? Because again, it's a golf course. There's no rocks. There's hardly any roots. It's a lot of pretty slow speed turning, not a lot of pedaling. And when you do have pedaling, it's like a pretty straight away either grass section or that road section. Mm-hmm. So it really does like, okay, who can run the lowest pressure and like not hold their tires over?
Yeah.
I think I was running 16 on that race. I even went into the pit and I said, hey, half PSI lower, because I think I started with 17 and I said maybe I was like 16 and a half, 16. I said like, hey, half PSI lower, and then we just like went down from that. Got better and better.
And by the way, that's on a tubular, so like, yeah, definitely on a clincher, that would be like Burp City probably. But
totally.
On a tubular, you can kind of get away with that with the thing being glued on your wheel. But yeah, your experience may vary.
Totally.
So, dude, what about like when you think about when you approach a mud race? Because, dude, it's about to get muddy, right? Like it's starting to get cold. That moisture in the ground is not going to evaporate, right? So, like, you roll up to a course and you make the decision to ride a mud tire, the Torino wet. What's going through your head?
All right, say that again.
So you roll up to a course, right? Yeah. And it's you've made the decision in your head. I'm running the mud tire. I'm running the Torino wet.
Yeah.
What's going through your head? Like, what made you decide that? Like, at what point is that it's okay? Like, we're at the limit. We need to ride like the most aggressive thing.
Yeah. So what happens often is that you kind of look out, and a lot of people say like, okay, it's raining. I'm running a mud tire, but as we've talked about before, like it's often advantageous to the rider to actually give a shot to the faster rolling tires and see where the limit of those tires are. And so often for me, I'll try to start on a little bit less aggressive of a tire. I'll try to start on that mix and kind of see where the slipping point is and see what I can get away with tire pressure. But often, the markers for me for using that wet tire, and they've actually changed a little bit once I got onto the Vitoria wet, because it's not a tractor tire of a Belgian mud tractor. It's actually like it's a little more advanced than just giant knobs, and so it rides differently. It has different characteristics than you might find on something with that like large spaced out knob. I'll look at things like how much hard pack wet slick contact I have. I'll look at how much grass I may have to pedal in. Oftentimes you find that grass is, even when wet or even when really muddy, will kind of accept almost any form of tread and give you traction as long as you kind of lean it correctly. And often I'll look at like how fast the course is going to be, and is having a larger tread pattern or having a more aggressive tread pattern going to hold me back in, going the speed that I need to go. Because I mean, that's when it comes down to it, racing is like who goes the fastest, the longest, right? So we'll look at stuff like, okay, well, how many accelerations and top speed do I need to actually be on? And is that going to, like, am I just throwing a giant tread on there? Is that going to affect me? Well, the reality is that with the Torino wet, the top speed stuff isn't actually like really in my consideration anymore. I mean, I've ridden them both, and I've taken them both off on drier courses, both the mixed and the Torino wet. And as far as speed goes, I can't really tell that much of a difference. I mean, like, it's such a fast tire that I will often, instead of and this is very new to me, and instead of just like holding off and trying to run that mixed all the time, I'll go to that Torino wet really quickly, because I'm like, okay, it's going to give me a ton of traction, but there's no downside to the speed. It's actually got a pretty like minimal tread set and uses siping to give a lot of its traction. So you're not hindered by like, okay, well, if I get on this tire, it's just going to like chuck a bunch of mud onto my bike. That's not that much of an issue anymore. Yeah, so I find that like, okay, even when it's like kind of, it's a condition that I might want to try and run a faster tire in, or a quote less aggressive tire, I'll put that wet on, because I know it's going to give me traction no matter what. I know that I can count on it on different types of wet conditions, and I also know that it's a really fast tire, and I'm not going to be limited by that rolling resistance.
So you're saying you basically feel very similar rolling resistance between the wet and the mix, and now that decision of I'm hooking up better, but I'm creating drag that most people have to make with their mud tires. That's gone for you. You can just pick the tread that works best based on the conditions, and you don't have to worry about that rolling resistance anymore.
Totally. I mean, it's a huge weight lifted off my shoulder. I mean, we look at that as like when you go to that, like that thick lug tire, you often are just like in the back of your head, you're like, all right, it's one of those days.
The ground is going to be sucking those things down forever.
I know. You're just like, great, cool. This is going to suck. And then like now you look at it, you're like, okay, cool. All right. It's like, it's more like putting on that, that softer compound Formula One tire where you're like, I'm still going to go 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I just have to have a little bit of siping to kind of grab things.
That's awesome.
Crazy. And so like, I mean, it's amazing as like the product designer. It's amazing to hear athletes talk about this and kind of, their experiences with how this has worked. Sometimes when you put these things down on paper, it's not always reflected in the real world, but obviously we did a lot of testing before we released these, and to have Steven, actually, this was the tire I think you won the championship on, wasn't it? The wet?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, that's awesome. And then I think Katie actually won a World Cup on that tire last year. So
yep, totally.
It's been something that has been, it was kind of like a interesting take from a design standpoint, because as Steven mentioned, typically mud tires have a big heavy lug. They roll really slow, but people kind of accept it because they want to make sure that they could tractor out of like those muddy ruts. And it was just one of those things that was accepted. So on the design end of things, we were trying to say, how can we take that compromise out of this, and still not hinder performance, but not have that kind of a setback. So, man, it's awesome to hear your stories on that.
Well, it's awesome to have it's great to just be able to have, the right tools for the job. And that's, as an athlete, as a cyclocross specific athlete, I mean, that's our sport is a sport of specificity, and it's not, we're not on road bikes, we're not on mountain bikes, and we're a bit of a bastard sport. And so like having the ability to have all of these cross specific components and tools is pretty unreal to me. I mean, I definitely say we're in the golden age of cyclocross materials.
Ken, did you have anything else you wanted to ask Steven? Or Steven, did you have anything else you wanted to mention?
I think I'm good, man. I think, it was really cool to be able to be on your show again. Thank you, Steven, for coming on as well and telling your stories. At Vitoria, it's very much an athlete-driven process to develop these products. And so hearing some stories of Steven using these all over the place and in definitely different conditions, it's just really something that it's cool, as a designer, but I think your listeners will agree.
Yeah, I think they're gonna love this show. All the tire geeks, I'm sure, are very thankful for both of you guys coming on. I mean, we have a tech show about cyclocross. Tires is like our biggest probably discussion point and the thing we talk about the most. So, Steven, hey, dude, it was great seeing you this weekend. Best of luck with the rest of the season, man. I know everybody will be watching, wishing you good things, and I probably will see you at Nationals.
Hope so.
The only other race I'm going to this year, I think, is Indy. And I don't think you're probably not coming out to that one. Because I think, is there an East Coast race that same weekend? There might be.
Yeah.
Or are you going to be in Europe?
Well, I'm about to. I got a couple more races over here. We're going to do Falmouth, and then over to Supercross Cup, and then I'm going down to Florida for a couple of weeks to train before nationals. My yearly pilgrimage to get the work done.
Excellent. Sounds wonderful. So, like I said, man, best of luck, and we'll be cheering for you again this year, and we'll see you in Tacoma.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I really had fun.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks again. All right, Mr. David Palin.
Yes, sir.
What'd you think of that?
You know what really impressed me about that is it wasn't in the past. We had Ken Avery really geeking out over tires, which was really cool.
Yeah,
and talking and introducing new stuff. But when Stephen Hyde's talking about this stuff, it's stuff that the pros do and know.
Yeah,
but us hacks in the back of the pack can use.
Yeah,
and it will help our racing as well.
There's no reason why anyone can't approach stuff just like that.
And we've talked about it before. You've said it a lot. Don't choose the tire based on like one feature, but what is really going to help you along the entirety of the course.
What's going to give you the fastest lap time. So I just like too that we got to have Stephen Hyde on just talking about a specific thing that he approaches in racing, not about his season and all that. We had him in here for one specific reason to talk about one specific thing, and we covered that really well in depth. And I really liked that discussion. It was really, really fun to do with those guys. So speaking though, Mr. David Palin, of tires hooking up and sticking.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else in your kit that would stick to anything?
Hopefully,
how do you stick your number on?
With it. Pins. I use pin. I don't use pins. I have.
Why would you use
I got
pins?
My hands on.
It's the 21st century. Why would you use pins, for God's sake?
I've actually got my hands on some beta testing of TNR-Tape 3.0. I haven't told you this yet. I'm lucky enough to have some 3.0, and I'm psyched to be using it.
That's awesome.
Dr. T, I snuck some to her, and she's going to be using it out there.
Yeah.
So Aaron's going to have some feedback with TNR-Tape.
Cool.
I don't know if you've been following Tyler Cloutier.
Yeah, I just watched him this morning.
Took 20th, which is amazing.
Friday
at the Koppenberg
20th.
Indeed.
Amazing.
And he actually did a little video on how he uses his TNR tape.
Yep.
And he's ripping it up out there.
Yeah.
But not ripping off his numbers.
Exactly.
Sonny Gilbert. Now, TNR Twirl Off, go check that out, man.
Go check out
Hashtag TNR Twirl Off 2019.
Yeah.
They have raised. Every time I think this is the top. How can you do anything more than this?
Up it goes.
Yeah.
The Thriller one is, in my opinion, almost perfection. So
it is indeed.
Sonny's
so
going
it's
to have
up to you,
her
Sonny
job
G.
set. Yeah. So TNR Tape, what it is a number adhering solution. It allows you to connect your race number to your race kit, be it a skin suit, jersey, whatever, without punching holes in it, without pinning it to your expensive suit or jersey or whatever. It's a tape that you apply, and we've said it over and over again. Don't go away thinking, I used to use the old adhesive sprays and I didn't like those. This is all new. This is not that.
Yeah, it's very far from that.
Very far from that.
This is far from that as it is from pins.
Right. Exactly. This is a way to connect your number that actually works without it pinning to your number. I gave some of this. I'm interested to see. I gave some of this to little Alex Morton.
Yeah,
the current junior cyclocross national champion in the U.S.
It is kind of funny that you call him Little Alex.
Yeah, since he's taller than me, and now, and I'm interested to get some feedback from him about what he thinks about it too, because he's been hearing us talk about it, and he wants to use it. So go check it out. TNRtape.com. Order the Tyler Cloutier pack, order the Sonny Gilbert pack, or just order the regular pack if that's what you want. You can get a smaller number of packs if you just want to try it out. If you see us at the races, you're going to have 2 more chances to get it from me at the races this season.
As well as socks, by the way.
As well as socks. I will be at Indy.
Yes.
And I will be at Nationals.
In Tacoma.
And I will have TNR Tape with me at both locations if you want to just have some to try out.
Right.
At Indy, I will have the van. I'll be easy to spot, but at Nationals, you're going to have to.
Hey, does Sherry have socks yet?
I don't know.
Does Sherry have TNR tape yet?
I don't know.
We got to find out. Well, you should know whether or not Sherry has socks.
Right. We got to make sure that Sherry Schwinderloff has socks and TNR tape.
TNR tape.
So anyways, if you want to try it out, catch up with me at one of the races, and I will give you one of the test packets. No problem.
Yeah.
Because that's one of their things that TNR Tape is. Not only are they supporting these riders, right? And they give you the opportunity to support the riders by just buying their packets of tape. I mean, God, that's
and
so
saving
awesome.
your kit, by the way.
And saving your kit. But they support the riders too.
Yeah.
They're supporting cyclocross, which we need right now, right? We have companies that are doing this, and I have stuck with cyclocross through thick and thin. Let's show them that it's worth it, guys.
Exactly.
So go out and check out TNR
there
Tape.
are other shows out there that will discuss how to save cyclocross and whether or not cyclocross needs to be saved.
Right.
We'll save that discussion for another day or let other people discuss it.
Right.
One way. I'm just going to lay it out here. The way to save cyclocross is show people there is a return on investment for supporting the sport that we all love.
Yes.
Hashtag support the people that support our sport. Go get some TNR tape today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Mr. David Palin, we have another interview/discussion to play that you were not a part of.
Another thing I wasn't part of. I'm getting the feeling that this show's happening without me.
On the last show, we talked about the SKF bearings, the Matrix, MTRX.
Yes.
Which is what people will find out MTRX stands for.
They don't have to now. Now they know.
Now they know. And so I contacted them, and one of their engineers, Mark Hinkley, contacted me back and had like, was leaving for Europe, so he's like, yeah, I can do it right today. And I'm deal, let's talk about these bearings because I'm so excited about them. So we have a great discussion with Mark.
Can we hear that?
About the SKF MTRX bearing, and we're going to play that.
When?
Right now.
No.
All right, Bike Shop CX listeners, we are back. We have another special guest on the show. We have with us Mark Hinkley from SKF. And listeners might remember we talked about the SKF bearings that are in the Cane Creek Hellbender bottom bracket. And now we have Mark here, one of the engineers for SKF, to give us more information and talk about it. Mark, welcome to Bike Shop CX, man.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Appreciate being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for connecting with us. I'm sure the listeners will be very happy. They like the very technical stuff, so that's why we got you here.
Oh, what's not to like? We got bicycles and bearings together. I mean, this is perfection.
I think bearings and tires are tied for what people like to talk about most on their bike.
I love it. I love it. Well, as a bearing engineer, there's a certain amount of appeal that has for me, right?
That's right. So, all right, we're talking about now. Is this technology, I'll call it, for this bearing? Is that what is called the MTRX? Is that what MTRX stands for?
Yeah, MTRX is it's a subset of a larger solution that SKF has in the industry that we call solid oil, and this solid oil, it's really an amazing product that it's a plastic, it's a polymer that is impregnated with a really high quality synthetic oil.
Okay. So what does MTRX mean? What does it stand for? Does that help?
MTRX is an abbreviation that we use specifically to call out the mountain bike or bicycle specific version of solid oil. And really what it stands, it's short for polymer matrix.
Okay.
And you just take the vowels out of the word matrix and you get MTRX.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. I thought it was like each letter stood for something or something. So, but I'll remember it easier that way.
Yeah. It's really short for that matrix that makes up that plastic that is an integral part of the solution for these bicycles.
All right. And so you mentioned solid oil. Can you tell us what solid oil means?
Yeah, absolutely. So solid oil is a term that SKF has for this solution that's part of our portfolio. And basically what it is, it's a mixture of oil and plastic that is put inside of a regular rolling element bearing. So either a ball bearing or a roller bearing. And we use it instead of grease or oil to lubricate the bearing. And this product has been part of the SKF portfolio for decades. for industrial solutions. Really an amazing product. Anytime that we've got an application that's really dirty or has a lot of like high pressure wash down requirements, like in the food industry or something, it's been a great product that just it lasts a really, really, really long time. Where a normal product, you might wash the grease out or contaminate it really badly with dirt or mud or something else, and the solid oil just works, and it keeps that bearing lubricated.
Yeah,
it's
so,
pretty amazing stuff.
So you mentioned in like the in the food industry, I used to work in a hospital, and it was a huge teaching hospital here in Michigan, and they had they have huge pieces of equipment down there, and you can, as soon as I read that, I could completely imagine how grease leaking out of the bearings into anything is a major problem there, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And that is, it's one of the things that, whether it's food, if you think of a conveyor that might be transporting a piece of food through a food processing facility, you don't want the bearing dripping grease into whatever it is they're trying to make, right?
Yeah, that's even more important than a bike leaking grease, right?
yeah, exactly. So it's a solution that has wide use, and it's amazing to me that we only thought of using it for bicycle bearings relatively recently. I'm a little disappointed that I didn't think of it myself, decades ago. But it really is a perfect application for the type of riding I know that I do and a lot of us do. Where the rain, the mud, it just takes a toll on bearings.
Right, and I mean,
it really wears them out.
In cyclocross, we've got the power washers, right, that are just blasting. I mean, you try as a mechanic in the pit, you try to avoid the bearings as much as you can, but at some point you have to clean the crank, right? You can't not clean the crank. So anything you can have bearing wise that's going to help alleviate that is a really good thing. So why does it not wash out? Because I mean, I have a set of these. I'm looking at them right now, and it looks like a standard. I mean, it even has the marking 61806, right? A standard, 30 by 42 by 7 sealed bearing is what it looks like. So why does it not? Why does the solid oil not come out of this?
All right, so you are absolutely right. What we start with, and from the outside, you're going to see what looks like pretty standard bearing.
Yeah.
But it installs, you treat it like the way you install it, the interface with your bike, it's the same, which is really great. So it makes it easy to use, easy to upgrade if that's what you're going to do. But the key is in that polymer matrix. So if you think about a normal grease, and I know we've all seen it. I know last time I popped apart my lower jockey wheel, the ball bearing inside was just absolutely seized up, and I popped the seal off of there, and it was filled more with mud than it was with grease.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know we've all seen that. It happens whether it's the jockey wheel or your bottom bracket. The grease is traditional grease is fluid, and it moves around. So when you start to apply a little pressure from the outside, whether it's the dirt pushing directly against the seal, or as you're washing your bike, maybe you spray it with the hose and that pushes some of the dirty water into and underneath the seal lip. Well, a traditional grease just kind of mixes in with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes part of an emulsion that just contaminates and starts to wear out your bearing.
Right.
Now we take away that fluid type grease, and we take all the free space inside that bearing and we fill it with plastic.
Okay.
Not just any plastic, but
right.
The solid oil that is then filled with oil. So that plastic takes up all the space. It's a solid piece. So it doesn't mix. It doesn't create this emulsion of mud and grease.
Gotcha.
It takes up all the space. So
I picture it like it's like a sponge. It's porous, right? And so the oil can move through it.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So you have a dry sponge, you drip a little water on it, the water spreads throughout the rest of the sponge, right?
Right.
It's similar here. The oil fills the entire cavity, the entire polymer that's within this, that's within the bearing.
Right.
And we estimate that volume for volume. So if you have a cubic centimeter of either grease or solid oil. So let's pretend you have exactly the same amount of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There is typically the solid oil has by volume nearly 70% of that volume contains oil.
Wow.
As where a traditional grease has about 30%.
Oh man, that's really interesting.
So, and then take into account that we now fill every available space within the bearing with the solid oil.
Right. And it's not going to move.
And it's not moving anywhere. Exactly.
Other than around the bearings where it's supposed to be.
Right, exactly. Yes. It rotates with the balls as the balls rotate within the bearing. And so it just it moves along with it, and it wets the contacting surfaces within the bearing with that oil that is in the polymer sponge, if you will, that solid oil matrix.
Yeah. Now, in the cutout picture that you guys have on your website, it looks like you can see the balls, and then it looks like they have this little bracelet-like thing around. I don't want to call it a cage like a cage bearing, but that's kind of what it is. It kind of looks like it keeps the balls spaced evenly. What is that thing called?
That is exactly what it is. It is a cage.
Okay.
It is a cage, and some bearings have a steel cage. Some bearings have a polymer cage. Others don't have any cage and might be a full complement bearing, or use even the solid oil as the cage to keep those balls separated. So the key is here, we start with a standard product, and we're able to fill it with solid oil to deliver this extra performance, to deliver this extra durability in this application. So that steel cage is part of the base bearing.
Okay.
That holds those balls and spaces those balls out so they're in the right place, and the balls are able to do their job.
Yeah, and the force that's going to be on them is evenly distributed, I would guess. Right, you're not getting,
exactly.
You're not getting too close together, and then a big gap, and that's going to cause all kinds of problems. So, well, that's really cool. Now, when I hold these and spin them, it feels a little bit stiffer than a lot of bearings you might feel right out of the box. And then in the past, when I've had other high end bearings that do feel a little stiffer right out of the box, it's because they kind of are the seals on them are a little. I hesitate to call it oversealed, but they're sealed really a little bit tighter than the optimal running amount. And then as they wear down to what you could consider quote unquote perfectly sealed. Is that kind of what's going on here with these?
So you've got a couple factors in what you feel, and holding it in your hand versus how it's going to feel on the bike.
Sure.
Is a bit different.
I tell people that all the time, right? They're like, "Oh, this feels weird." I'm like, "Yeah, but you have no leverage with your fingers, right? You're just pushing right on it. So, yeah, trust me, it'll be fine." So, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
First, the punchline. You're talking about when you equip your bike with MTRX, you may increase the friction 1 or 2 watts when you ride, right? So you may have a little more drag, but you're talking an almost immeasurable amount,
right? Compared
to the power that you're putting out. When you load these, if you take that bearing in your hand and you kind of put some force on it and rotate it, you'll feel it get smoother, and it'll feel actually less like there's less drag than if you just lightly try to move
you're
the inner ring versus
I can
the outer
feel
ring.
I can feel it right away. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that is more representative of how it's going to feel when it's on your bike, because you're going to actually have force going through the bearing.
Right.
And so what you're getting in there is that solid oil that fills the bearing is actually making contact with the balls. It's making contact with the inner and outer ring surfaces, and it's making contact with the seal surfaces.
Okay.
All right. So when you just lightly move the inner ring versus the outer ring, you're going to feel that there's a little resistance there.
Right.
But once you load it and you actually start making the balls roll with respect to the raceways, everything starts moving the way it's designed to move, and you get what is more of a normal lower friction state.
Gotcha.
It's really how it operates. But what it does, and you mentioned something with other bearings, and I completely understand what you described with, as you use them a bit, they kind of break in.
Yes.
And they get a nice, feel to them. That break-in is typically the seal is beginning to wear a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So it just eases up, because most of the friction that you get in a ball bearing like this comes from the seal, not from the balls and how they spin. So when you feel that open up, that friction in the seal is becoming less. Unfortunately, what that also means is the seal is becoming less effective. Right. So when a seal, by its very nature, is a sliding, contacting, component, and as it wears, it's going to slide, it's going to wear. Well, the longer we can postpone that wear, the longer we can make it last, the more effective the seal is going to be. Now, it may not alleviate the friction as quickly, but what the solid oil is doing, if you imagine on both sides of the bearing, you've got the inside, the inboard and the outboard side. Both are completely filled with solid oil. And right next to the solid oil is the seal.
Right.
That oil is not just lubricating the balls in the raceway. That oil that's in the seal is also lubricating the seal lip.
Gotcha.
So that seal lip is now able to do its job better, longer, because we're providing good, clean oil to that sliding surface.
So yeah, it's actually lubricating the seal lip. I never even thought of that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's part, like you said, that's part of the reason why these should last a lot longer than just any kind of standard bearing you're pressing in.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one more. I want to just. There's one more element that helps that seal do its job better. And if we think about it, so we're filling all the space behind the seal, and one of the things that happens when you power wash, or maybe just as you get mud packed in next to the seal, it begins to push on the seal. And normally that seal doesn't have anything behind it supporting it, and it will flex inside. Well, as it flexes, it'll open up the seal gap a little bit that allows contamination to go
more
inside
stuff
the bearing.
To go inside.
Easier.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, the solid oil, the MTRX, actually acts as a supportive, like a backing ring, so that that seal can't flex in. Like if you imagine a diving board, when you put pressure on the end, it bends down, right?
Right.
Well, now you're actually supporting the end of it so it can't bend, and it keeps the seal in the position that is designed to operate at its optimal efficiency.
So there's sort of like an outward pressure from inside the bearing. Not that it's under pressure, but it's supported by this polymer, so that it can't easily flex in, again, allowing more contaminants, and you get water in there. Then the grease life is even shorter than normal. So that's really interesting.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
Exactly.
So you guys, I believe, and is the plan to make these, I saw that you have these available for basically any pivot point on a mountain bike, say like a full suspension mountain bike. You guys have these bearings available pretty much for any pivot point, correct?
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, there are a few specials out there that aren't part of our standard assortment, but with the interest that we have from the industry, we're working to make sure we try to cover as many of those bases as we can. Right now we don't have them all, but we are working to try to have them available so that we can get people the MTRX solution for their bikes, no matter which bike they're riding. But that's a work in progress, I'll say.
And I saw, and I mean, obviously you guys have the 30 mil spindle on a bottom bracket because I'm holding it right here, but that like a smaller one for a Holotech is coming soon.
Yep.
Okay, that's going to be huge. I'm sure there's a lot of people waiting for that. Because they're going to watch these. They're like, oh my God, this is going to be like amazing. What's like typical life that someone can see out of this? I mean, I know it depends on where it is, and I know you guys are making headset bearings too, correct?
That is more from an SKF standpoint. I don't have a headset in our standard offering, but that is something that Cane Creek, obviously, I know you got their Hellbender Neo in your hand. That's something from Cane Creek standpoint that I think they're probably looking at.
So on these bottom brackets for the MTRX, what kind of like longevity are you guys seeing? I mean, how long typically? I mean, I know there's a ton of variables in there that we can't cover them all, but what life range or mileage range are most people going to get out of one of these or a pair of these bearings?
The short answer is a lot more than you get today.
That's a good answer, right?
but I'll give you a little bit of an example. So the engineer that actually came up with this, he's one of our application engineers in Germany, and he's a semi-professional mountain bike racer.
Okay.
So he was failing his bearings fairly regularly. Mud, you know the deal.
Oh, yeah.
The mud would contaminate them; they'd fail. And he's a bearing engineer. Well, he came up with the idea to put the MTRX solution in his own bike and see how it works. That first year, he put 5,500 kilometers, so 3,300-ish miles.
Nice.
On his bike.
One set of bearings.
And didn't baby it. Power washed it multiple times. And he raced, and he trained, and he raced, and he trained. So he was not babying this.
Yeah.
He tore them apart after his season, and the bearings practically looked new. They were not showing any signs that they were needing to be replaced.
He mostly took them apart out of curiosity, right? It's like, I got to see what's going on here.
Well, I'm glad he did.
Yeah.
I'm glad he did because it was a result of that and his personal experiences that, okay, I think we got something here that the industry might be interested in. And so when I tell you, I can tell you he rides a lot harder than I do.
Right.
And for him, he put over 3,000 miles on his mountain bike in that first season.
Yeah.
And had no issue whatsoever. The bearings they look practically new. So
he's riding harder than the average person, I'm sure, who's not doing 3,000 miles anyway. So yeah, that's good. You're probably going to get several seasons out of these as a typical, recreational mountain biker, if not more than that even. So
it's my expectation.
Yeah. And I mean, so actually in a way it's almost like unknown. It could be the life of the bike, right? I know that's hard to say for bottom bracket bearings, but oh my God, this could be a total game changer as far as that goes. So, well, Mark, that is amazing, dude.
I agree with your expression there. It can be a game changer.
Yes.
It is different. It's going to change what your expectations are for these bearings. It really does.
Because I had actually someone email me like, well, but you can't serve. People are used to being able to service even sealed bearings, right? Taking the seals out and I'm like, but you don't have to. That's the whole point. Yeah. You don't have to service them. You don't need to ever, imagine a world where you don't ever have to touch your bottom bracket bearings. That's what these are, I think, are filling that gap right there. So.
Yes. And I would actually request, don't take them apart.
Yeah.
Because the polymer, you might, unless you're going to buy an extra set of bearings and just decide you don't want to, actually use one of them, which I don't recommend, but because as you pop it out, I know when I've popped apart my bike bearings, I tend to use an X-Acto knife to get underneath the lip of the seal, and it pops out. And well, that right behind that seal is the polymer.
Yeah.
So when you jam something underneath there, you're going to be cutting into the polymer. So I would recommend you just use them, not tear them apart, and try to put them back together before you use them.
Yeah. Well, hey, Mark, dude, this has been so interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You can get Bike 24. You can order any one of the bearings in the assortment. It's available there. And one interesting thing we are doing, we're working with our facility in Cleveland. That's where we're actually processing the production bearings for this application. So it is something we're doing right here in the USA.
Cool.
And it's really great to have that local resource that delivers this solution for us. It's really exciting for me anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, man. Well, I'm sure this will stir up some questions. If I get some questions that I can't answer, can I ask you about them?
Of course. I'm here.
Well, Mark, man, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure giving us some information about these. I hope more people go out and purchase some of these, press them into their bike frames, and get riding them, because I think they're really cool. So thanks again for being on, man, and maybe we'll talk again soon, some more bearing stuff.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Scott.
All right, Mark. Bye-bye. All right, Mr. David Palin. What did you think of that?
I was impressed, and now I have one that you have, and I have it in my hand, and this whole thing about it does not feel very smooth. Well, it feels smooth but tight.
It's very smooth, but it does feel a little tight. But
and
then you push
when you
on
squeeze it, whoa!
You can feel. You can't feel the full difference just by squeezing, but you can feel a difference.
That there is a difference
that would then get
that obviously would
greater
be bigger
if you had your foot on a pedal pushing on this thing.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it really, really cool stuff. So yeah, people go check that out. The website for SKF is www.skf-mtrx.de. And the place you can buy these is on Bike 24. If you want to just buy the bearings, there's a link off there on there. And you can go to Bike 24. That's how I got these two that I'm looking at that I got to put in one of my bikes. And it's all right there. www.skf-mtrx.de. Probably then have to click on the English link to get it in English.
Or you can buy them in German.
If you can speak German. And there you go. So go check those out and give them a try. The cool thing about them is, unlike ceramic bearings, they're not 800 times the price of regular bearings. They're a little bit more expensive, but not much. I mean, they're still in the ball game, right? Yeah, so that's the thing with the ceramic bearings. You're talking huge price increase.
There goes our ceramic bearing sponsorship.
Right, and this is something that could potentially last you the life of your bike. So, man, oh man.
Yeah.
I don't think they really know how long these could last.
Because they've never been able
to wear one out, basically. Yeah, is kind of how it went. So, awesome stuff. So, Mr. David Palin, speaking of
wearing out.
Speaking of wearing out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Whoop.
You want to talk about Whoop, do you?
Today's episode is also brought to you by Whoop. Whoop is the performance tool that is changing the way people track their fitness and optimize their training. Whoop provides a wrist-worn heart rate monitor that pairs to their app that provides analytics and insights on recovery, strain, and sleep.
Do you know...
Sleep being the key.
Sleep is my key. My key's always been sleep. But this is how you know when your body is recovered or when it needs rest. By getting to know your nervous system through heart rate variability and quality of sleep, right?
Yeah.
It automatically tracks your workouts, gets strain scores that let you know how strenuous your training was, which a lot of apps do.
Yes.
The key is it then even gets more data, like average heart rate, max heart rate, calories burned, and then it tracks your sleep.
Yeah, that to me is
the
real
recovery
big,
angle is the part that really differentiates
and unique. Yeah, differentiates it from everything else.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And I mean, it's so funny now when we're going to races. Not only is everybody being like, "Hey, this TNR-Tape is awesome," but like you're seeing Whoop straps on a lot of people, and they're talking about Whoop and the recovery thing, and like, I don't know if I should race today. Whoop would be mad at me, right? It's becoming like a Google kind of thing, right? Where people are just like putting
Whoop
it into,
as a verb, right?
into their discussions now, and you're hearing that at races over and over and over.
I know
at least
a number of athletes that try very hard to not look at their Whoop app on morning race day.
Which makes sense.
Which makes a lot of sense because they're saying, it doesn't matter whether I'm in optimal position or not. I don't want to get psyched out by I shouldn't be racing today because I'm not optimal.
You're not going to not go, right? You're
exactly.
going. Right?
We're going, so I might as well believe that I'm optimal.
I might as well think everything's green.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah, that's very, very true. I know a lot of people are doing that. So go check it out at whoop.com, WHOOP. That's WHOOP.com. Use the code BIKESHOP at checkout, and you'll save 15% and optimize the way you train.
And that's 15% on either a 12 or an 18-month
Right, because all you pay for is a subscription.
That's it. They send you this stuff for free.
For free. 5-day battery life. Live heart rate monitor. You can't go wrong.
No,
so
you
there
can't.
you go.
Yeah.
Go check it out.
I will tell you.
Yeah.
When you use the battery recharge module, make sure to take it off when you're at home. Don't ride with it on your wrist and figure I'm going to recharge on my way to work today or anything like that, because it can come off your bike perhaps sometime when you're riding or off your wrist, and then you are stuck without a Whoop strap until you can get a new one.
All right, Mr. David Palin. So that's Whoop. Thanks again. Big thanks to them for being a sponsor of this podcast.
This being Bike Shop CX.
And now we are ready for listener questions.
Always my favorite part of the show.
Mr. David Palin.
Yeah.
I'm going to read. Do you want to read the first one or do you want me to?
No, I want to read the second one.
All
I can read the first one and the second one, but I definitely want to read the second one.
I'll let you read the second one. I'll read the first one. Dear Scott and Mr. David Palin, I just bought a pair of NOS wheels, Mavic Mach 2 rims on Chorus hubs.
Chorus hubs.
Whoa. They never had a tire glued. Each wheel laced identically, not mirror image.
I see where this is going.
The pulling spokes are elbow out on the drive side, and the pulling spokes are elbow in on the non-drive side. I learned to build from the Jobst Brandt book, and since he says this is not a good idea, all the wheels I've ever built, I've laced with the pulling spokes elbow in on both sides, so-called mirror image lacing. Do you think it's worth rebuilding the wheel? I'm just talking about the rear. I've glued up the front and raced it last week. So just going to stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think it's worth rebuilding the wheel.
I would agree with you on that. I mean, to
I think
tear
it's
it down
overkill.
and rebuild,
nah. It's one of those details where if you're doing it when you're building up a wheel and you want to do it that way, that's perfectly fine. There's no problem there. But it's not a big enough deal to rebuild an entire... It'd be like saying, I'm going to rebuild an entire wheel because I want to have gold nipples instead of silver nipples or something like that, right? It's a small detail that... You know,
although gold and silver nipples aren't performance issues.
Yeah,
and this kind of is, but it's so marginal.
So marginal.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't even worry about it at all.
And honestly, if you're gonna rebuild them, once you tear these out, now you need a whole new set of spokes, a whole new set of nipples, because you really shouldn't rebuild them on the same spokes, because the marginal gain you would get by rebuilding it is supplanted by the marginal loss you'll get by reusing spokes that have already been laced up.
Yeah. So he says, on the rear, I know there's a danger that the increased tension in the pulling spokes from pedaling can pull the spokes crossing to the right and make the rear mech touch the spokes in the largest sprocket. But when I dug out my old copy of Jobst Brandt, he says the effect is marginal, and I agree.
Yep.
It would be a pain to glue on a tire and then discover it does touch the spokes. Campag 10-speed doesn't leave much room. Also, I think that the identical lacing on this wheel might be a sign that it wasn't built with the care that I put into my own wheels, so that's an argument to rebuild. Kind of like how you wouldn't jump onto and ride a bike where the QR skewers are pointing at weird angles.
That's a good point. That's a fair point, Finn.
Yeah, it might make you question other things. Yeah. It's a clue that they were done up with care, so you should check them. Thanks for the great show, Finn. Still, Finn, I don't think that's that big of a deal. I wouldn't worry about it at all. I would just put them on there, see if they work, and then ride it. Make sure it works before you glue the tire on.
Yep.
I know you're not going to have the same forces just on the stand as you were, but I mean, you can gauge if you've got a decent amount of space there, then you can be pretty safe that you're going to have.
Those spokes aren't going to change not significantly,
right?
In
Not
length,
not in that much. So yeah, I wouldn't do it. I would just glue the tire and ride it, and then not worry about it.
And then the other nice thing about this is, if you have any issues with it, if you don't win the first race that you ride on this wheel, you can blame us.
You blame us or the wheel.
Or the wheel,
yeah. There you go. So, all right, Finn, hey, man, thanks for the question, and thanks for listening to the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I get to read the second one, which is, hello, MDVP and Mr. Scotty D.
Wow.
Like, right on point.
Exactly.
I don't know who this could be from.
I
on.
tweeted the beginning of this.
I know you did. First, you're awesome. Hold on, let's go back.
Boom.
First, you're awesome. Second, have you noticed how many insanely muddy races we've had to do already this season? And tomorrow's, obviously this was last week, at Cincy CX prediction is for another sloppy one, which turned out to be accurate.
That was true.
Right? Whoever wrote this is a very smart woman. Or man, but we'll see.
I think it might be a woman. Yeah.
I think so. It's been hard on the bikes, particularly the brake pads.
Yeah.
And the Royal We have run up against a bit of a shortage. You would have loved the scene last weekend when on a rear weekend off from UCI Racing at Dougie Fresh CX. Now we're getting a little bit closer here. We're knowing who it is. And I wandered into our LBL,
I think
LBS, local bike shop.
Yep.
And asked to buy out their stock of the metal brake pads for the GRX.
They go in. It's like, we want your entire stuff.
We'll take the lot.
What do you right.
I'll have the lot. The mechanic in employ must be very smart. Whoever wrote this is a very intelligent person.
They should have a PhD.
They should. The mechanic in employ, without skipping a beat, size dug up and stated bluntly, organic pads are better.
I love that she includes in there, without skipping a beat, sized dug up. I can just see the guy like looking dug up
and down,
head to toe, like, oh,
what's this guy know,
this
man?
guy doesn't know
what
what
a
he's
noob.
doing.
What a noob. I'm going to help him out, and I'm going to tell him.
I'm going to give him some information.
Because that's what I do.
That's what I do.
This was pretty funny to me, generally, because I love it when SMEs state something is better,
right,
without considering the circumstances, the requester, etc. So, I mean, this is a classic case of mansplaining, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's bike mechanic explaining.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's like, let me show you how. Let me tell you. Let me give you some knowledge that you might not have.
Exactly. We talk about this.
I'm on this side of the desk,
That's
therefore
right.
I know everything.
I know better. I've been doing this for 5 years now. I know everything, and I took 3 Shimano classes online.
Right.
2 of them were about sales, but okay.
Right. Two of them were about how to sell more organic brake pads.
And the other one was how to hook up Di2.
Right.
So first, please explain to this guy and everyone else why my esteemed husband would be requesting an inferior product, and perhaps give a little advice for all the races who have been experiencing the same conditions and may need a little CX bike TLC and don't have a Dougie Fresh CX on payroll. He gets paid?
He must.
All
he
right.
Gets paid in coffee.
All the very best. Sunny D.
Sunny D. Oh, my goodness. This is so funny. Yeah. Better is relative, right?
Oh, man. And it's funny because you and I were talking about this a bit offline, and there's this thing where bike shops do this, and they mostly do it to women.
Yes.
This sense of we know better, and that's why many women feel intimidated to go into a bike shop, because they don't want to be talked down to or made to feel like they don't know what they're talking about. And if you have some knowledge...
So here we have one of the better race mechanics in the country.
Mm-hmm. Who knows a little something about whether or not metal pads are better.
He's been doing this for years. Whose wife was second at U.S. Nationals. Yeah. At U.S. Cyclocross Nationals last year.
Yeah, won Jingle Cross.
He's pitted countless times in UCI races.
This is not his first
in
brake pad
in both
exchange.
the U.S. and in Europe.
Yeah.
Walks in, asks for something, and the guy tells him, "No, what you want, what I want to sell you is better than what you want."
This is where you and I kind of always take a little different tact on these things, and
we do.
I give the guy a little bit of a benefit here, of a doubt, and where I could see where his opinion comes from, that organic pads are better.
Yeah.
Right? In many cases, they are. But here's where I give you this advice, unknown mechanic to us.
Right.
Unknown shop to us. Right? Ask one more question. Just one more question usually can avoid the embarrassment of being called out on Bike Shop CX. Because one question would have been, why are you looking for metal pads?
What are you going to use metal pads
What's the use?
for? Right.
Not like, what's the use of that? No. What is the intended use of these pads?
Yeah. And then
can you imagine the discussion that this guy would have had that he could then tell his friends about and everyone?
Right.
I talked to the Dougie Fresh CX. The mechanic to Sonny Gilbert
CX
herself.
Fame.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
But no, he puts himself in an embarrassing position because he knows if he had asked that one question, Dougie Fresh would have said, this is what I want. This is why I want these pads. This is what I'm thinking.
Right.
He would have agreed that in that case, metal pads are better. And he would have saved himself some embarrassment and would have looked a lot more professional.
So organic pads are only better if there's some compound left on the backing plate.
After the first lap.
Once there's no more pad left,
then they are metal pads.
Then they are not better, right? So, what is better? It depends on what you're talking about. In perfectly dry, yes, organic pads break a little better.
Yeah,
I think.
they do.
But when you're wearing, if they wear out in a lap or a half a lap, that's not better.
No, it's not.
Then metallic pads are better. So, but I agree with you, Mr. David Palin. Ask that one more question.
Just one more question. It generally works better.
Just have an inkling of why. I wonder why this person wants this, right?
When someone comes in and says, I want to buy a bike with canty brakes.
Right.
Don't just say, oh, you have to buy a bike with disc brakes.
Yeah. Disc brakes are better.
Disc brakes are better. There may be a reason.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So ask that question. It engages the customer.
Right.
And then now you're on their side.
Yeah.
Rather than, they always talk about the customer's always right. Not always. Sometimes they're not the customer. But you want to engage them so now you're on each other's side.
Yeah.
You're not trying to argue with them about what they want.
Right. So.
And certainly you don't want to come across as looking just like an upsell.
All right, Mr. David Palin. Here is the last question, which we just got today.
Yeah.
Scotty D and Mr. David Palin. Hi, I recently got around to re-gluing my swap meet tubulars. Despite everything looking good and getting the race-ready, quote-unquote, race-ready report from the previous owner. Once I got them home and let some air out of the tires, they rolled off with ease. I could see the person saying, these are these are race-ready.
Yeah.
PSA, always check your own gear or have a trusted mechanic do it for you.
Partway
through the gluing process, I remembered that my bike takes a slightly offset dished rear wheel. While tweaking the wheel, a few of the aluminum nipples started shearing off. Not wanting to take any chances, I replaced all the nipples on the wheel with new brass ones. Good move.
Smart.
Now to the actual question. Due to scheduling, it's taken a while to get around to finishing this. That means my rear wheel has been sitting with 2 coats of glue on the rim and a coat on the tire for about a week now. Am I okay to just continue the normal gluing process to finish mounting my tire? I know a day or two cure time between coats is good, but at what point is the glue's working time exceeded? Thanks for the great show and advice, Andrew. Yes, a week is nowhere near too much time.
No.
If you remember, when we had Mark Legg on, he routinely lets Katie's wheels sit for 2 weeks. That's his standard technique to do it. The main issue you kind of want to avoid is you don't want a lot of dust.
That's where I was going.
You don't want a lot of contaminants getting on them. So you don't really want a ton of dust getting on them. If you
don't do this in your workshop. Where you're then
cutting 2x4s and stuff,
yeah.
And stuff like that. But if they're in a relatively clean, dry place, a week is no problem at all. What the maximum time for this is it completely depends on all that thing. How dry is it where you live? is there stuff getting on that? But it takes a lot longer than a week. You're nowhere near the time that it would take. So yeah, man, just finish getting those that offset in there, get those brass nipples on there, and glue that sucker up, man.
And race it, man. You're running out of time.
And then it will really be, quote unquote, race ready.
Yeah.
So there you go. All right, Mr. David Palin.
Yes, sir.
What a great show, man. If people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to do it?
I would do it at Mr. David Palin on the Twitter and on the Instagram.
And you can get me, Scott Diedenbach, at BikeShopCX on both Instagram and Twitter. And hope you guys enjoyed the show. We want to give an update. We don't know exactly when, but we are going to have Jeff Proctor come on to talk about the scholarship that we're doing for people who were so awesome and so kind to become Wide Angle Podium members and pick Bike Shop CX as the show that they want to support.
Yeah.
We are definitely going to make one scholarship for sure. We're not there yet.
We're pretty close.
If you want to still become a Wide Angle Podium member and again, choose Bike Shop CX as the show you want to support, that money will still go towards this.
So this is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You, dear listener, I'm talking to you. Yeah. Yeah, you can be the one that tips the scale.
Sure.
And you
absolutely.
can say, because of me,
someone got a scholarship.
Yeah.
So I talked to Jeff the other day. We're going to have him on the show at some point, probably not until after the first of the year, where he's actually going to do a longer segment with us rather than just a quick segment, which is going to be amazing. We'll talk about what kind of stuff this is going to allow him to do, what he's going to do, and all this great stuff that, being able to make it easier for some of these kids to get to the best cyclocross camp in the country is just an amazing thing. And thank you for everybody that's been showing support for it on Twitter, social media, everything. I know the official Wide Angle Podium membership drive is over, but you can become a member at any time. And again, any members that still subscribe now, they will still be supporting this scholarship fund that we're doing. We'll give more specific information. If you already are a member and if you have become a member, we are doing Monday morning coffee every Monday as bonus content for members. And we'll be giving more information about this in those shows too, because those are the people that have actually paid the money and are the supporters of this scholarship. So you'll be getting a little bit more information in those Monday morning coffee episodes that I put out every Monday morning. So
should we drop the big rumor?
Oh.
Is this where we put it in the show?
No.
Or do you want to wait and put that on?
The big rumor is going to be in the bonus content.
Bonus content. Yeah. So that's worth it right there.
That's worth it right there. That and the scholarship fund. So, all right, Mr. David Palin, I think that's it.
And with that, the bike shop is closed.
All right, that's the show this time. I know it's going to be a long one, but it was hard to gauge with these huge interviews that we had, and we didn't want to leave any of them out. So thanks, everybody, for bearing with us. Again, thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. And thanks for supporting Bike Shop CX and cyclocross in general. All right, I hope everybody is getting out there and riding. If you are getting out there and riding, you know the drill. Be careful out there. Take care of each other out there. And until next time, the Bike Shop is closed.